Number 1. Witch House. There was this house in my neighborhood that had a weird story to it that I had heard over and over growing up. A very old woman lived there, and no one ever really had seen her outside of her house in years. Of course, when there are children in a neighborhood with a house like that, kids are going to start spreading stories about the house. The most common one, of course, was that the old woman was an evil witch, and that she kidnapped children from the neighborhood and ate them. I won't lie and say that this story didn't scare me as a kid, because it really did. But no one ever saw the woman at all, or actually anyone go into and out of the house. And my parents told me it was just an abandoned house. When I was 12, I started hanging out with my friends later in the evening. Didn't really get into trouble, but we did get bored often. In early fall of that year, we had recently started back up at school. After a rowdy summer, we weren't quite ready to just settle down yet. So a couple weeks after school had started, we were hanging out late on a Friday night. And it just so happened to be Friday the 13th, so we were trying to find something scary to do. Of course, I was showing a bit of bravado that there was nothing that could scare me. Then my friend Paul and I began daring each other an escalating series of scary dares. So finally, Paul dared me to break into the old witch's house and scare her. There wasn't really anything scarier I could dare him, so I was pretty stuck with it. Yeah, I was nervous as hell as we approached the house. I tried to remember my parents telling me the house was just abandoned. There were never any lights on. There was never a car in the parking lot. There was never anything there to indicate that anyone had been in the house for a very long time. In order to not get caught, we snuck into the backyard of the house. It had a high fence, but once we got through it, it would give us cover in case anyone noticed us. Paul broke the lock on the fence door, and the four of us snuck in. We weren't doing a great job at being quiet, though, so I kept expecting a back porch light to come on or something. Nothing did, though. The back door was understandably locked. I felt that maybe I could bow out of the dare, because we had already vandalized the fence. I didn't think we could justify damaging the door or one of the windows. However, that isn't how it worked out. One of the windows was unlocked, so Paul removed the screen from the window, and I had full access to get into the house. I climbed into the house. It was really dusty, and I tried to suppress a cough. I was absolutely sure at this point that no one lived in the house, but that didn't mean someone wasn't in there. And like any young kid, the possibility of there actually being a witch did remain on my mind. I walked through the kitchen, just surprised by the amount of dust and cobwebs in the house. But I was relieved to a degree as well. The unkept nature of the house just kept making me more positive that there was no one in the house. The floor creaked with every step, and I was positive that if there was anyone there, they would have to hear the creaking. It was obvious that someone, being me, was walking around in the house. I got in the hallway, and it was no better than the kitchen. There were some closed doors and a staircase in the middle of the hall. I had no intention on going up to the second floor, however. I'd just tell my friends that I did. There was an opening to a room at the far end of the hall. This is where I assumed that the living room must be. I decided that I would check it out, and then I would head back to my friends and let them know that the house was abandoned. I crept through the hallway and turned into the doorway. However, I stopped and didn't enter the room at all. There were bones all over the room. Bones all over the floor. Bones on the furniture. They were animal bones. There was no way any of them were human, but they were everywhere. I couldn't even step into the living room, since it was blanketed with them. They weren't like chicken bones either, something that could be rationalized by too much Kentucky Fried Chicken and no garbage can. There were many different kinds of animal bones there. I'm not sure how long I stood there, looking at the room, trying to figure out why someone would have a room like this. I'd never seen anything so bizarre. I didn't check out the rest of the house. I just left immediately and told my friends what I had seen. They wanted to go in and check it out, but I told them I was not going to go back with them. I was way too creeped out. They eventually agreed and came with me. I really would never be able to guess what was going on there, other than someone at some time had a thing for killing creatures and leaving their bones there, or who knows. I certainly don't, but it was weird. Number 2. Camp. I started camping at a really early age. My parents taught me the wonders of nature and how good it was to be out in it whenever I could. I grew up in a very rural area, so there was plenty of countryside to spend time in. But also, one thing I learned from going out at such an early age was that I became very familiar with the wilderness, the animals, the birds, and everything that was in that area. That's important to know going into this story. I enjoyed camping so much that as I got into my teen years, I began going on many camping trips. The vast majority of them were just me being alone. My parents used to joke that when I got older, I'd probably end up as an old hermit, out in the woods, because I enjoyed being out there so much. When I was 15, I went out and decided to spend an entire weekend out in the hills. Friday was a holiday, so I had 3 days to be out there. I decided that I was going to go to this area that I had been to a few times. It was a very long walk, and I had to leave early in the morning in order to get there by late afternoon. It was a nice area by a creek that I always had a nice relaxing time by. Everything went normally for most of the evening. I built my fire, did a little fishing in the creek. I made myself some dinner, and then did a little writing in my journal. I really don't know what time it was, but it was pretty late in the night. I heard an ear-piercing scream. Shocked, I actually jumped up to my feet and looked around. The scream was so sudden and unexpected that I couldn't tell what had made the scream, nor from which direction it had come from. I waited, expecting to hear it again, but it didn't come right away. A bit unnerved still, but thinking it might have just been a loon, I sat down and tried to get back to writing again. I was probably sitting there for another 10 minutes before I heard another scream coming from the woods. This time, I had been expecting to hear it again, and I immediately knew that it was not a loon. It was a human scream, and it was a pained human scream. And this time, also, there was more than one. I could also tell which direction they were coming from. The scream continued for a short period of time before stopping again. I was unsure of what I could do at this point. I felt an obligation to check around and if someone was in danger, to help him. But I was also a bit afraid that whatever was going on could happen to me as well. I didn't have a gun on me, but I did have a flashlight and a fillet knife. It took me a while to finally get up the guts and realize that if I was in danger, I'd want someone to come and try to help me. I didn't know if the scream was from someone getting hurt by someone else, or maybe someone fell and broke their leg or something. I didn't know, but I felt really obligated to find out. I set out with the knife, unsheathed. I went into the direction I heard the screams coming from. The light wasn't that powerful. It was a really standard handheld flashlight. I could see right in front of me, but not far in front of me. I crept out in the direction of the scream. I shined the flashlight out and even yelled, "Hello?" back towards the direction. It was quiet as I crept through the woods, trying to find the source of the scream. So far, though, there was nothing. The screaming had stopped right after I had called out and was silent for a while. I began thinking I wasn't going to find anything, and it was then that I heard the screaming start up again. But this time, it was coming from the complete opposite direction. I turned and went back through the woods towards my camp. I have to admit, it was terrifying, turning my back to the woods that I had been creeping through as I headed back. Although the scream was coming from a different direction, I had my back towards the area that I had first heard it from. Pretty much all the way back to the camp, I was on edge. And when I got back to the camp, I noticed the screaming was not coming from the campsite. It was coming from further back. It sounded like the exact screaming I had heard in the first place. But why would it have made such a dramatic change in position? And it only happened after I had made my presence known. I thought about it for a long while. The screaming continued, but I had gone out into the woods once already. Everything just seemed really weird. I decided that whatever was going on, it was someone messing with me. So I decided I wouldn't go back out again. Instead, I sat down by the fire and kept a lookout around me. I didn't sleep that night. After I had decided not to go back out into the woods, the screaming continued for roughly an hour. When it stopped for good. But the silence was just as terrifying as the screaming had been. In the morning, I went home early. This is really the first time I have told anyone this story, and I never found out anything had happened that night. Number 3. Caution. I really don't believe in intuition or psychic ability or anything like that. However, every now and then, you can have a feeling about something and act on it, and it will greatly benefit you. It's not really luck or anything, you just have to think about your circumstances. This happened when I was 15 years old. I am an only child, and my parents had been wanting to go on a second honeymoon for a while. They were somewhat really protective of me, so they waited until I was much older to do it. I, on the other hand, was looking forward to spending some time to myself in the house. I rarely got such an opportunity. I'm a bit different than my folks. They like to keep the house lit up, and they tend to go to bed really early. They do this even on weekends, when they don't have to get up for work. I like sleeping in, and staying up all night with the lights off. I always like the dark, and don't get why people would waste the dark by keeping lights on all the time. In the first couple days that I was in the house by myself, nothing really happened. I had a television in my bedroom, and I spent a lot of time playing video games or reading. On the third night, while I was upstairs in my bedroom, I suddenly heard a knocking at the door. I didn't have any idea who it could have been. I mean, I didn't know anyone who would come over without sending me a text message or something. All of my parents' friends knew that they were out of town. It was nighttime, so I assumed they weren't missionaries or something. After a few moments, I heard another knocking. A few moments later, a third knocking came. Then, it was quiet for a while. I figured whoever was there figured out that no one was home and simply left. A few hours went by. I don't remember exactly what time it was, but I know that it was pretty late. As usual for me, I was walking around the house in the dark. I was in the kitchen, at the back of the house, with the refrigerator open. I was pulling out some items to make a snack when suddenly, I heard another knock at the door. It was late. Way later than I had ever known anyone to knock on my door. I began wondering if something had happened to my parents, or something, so I got really worried for a few moments. But I thought, if it were the police giving me information about my parents, then they probably would have called me. Another knock came at the door. After thinking for a moment, I decided I'd better check and see who it was. I contemplated turning the lights on, but something stopped me from doing that. I just had a bad feeling, so I actually grabbed a large kitchen knife out of the cutting block and carried it cautiously into the living room with me. There hadn't been another knock, however. I did hear some noise. I resisted again, calling out. I crept over to the door, hearing some sounds and not really knowing what was going on. Again, I really wasn't positive why I was being so overly cautious, but I just felt really negative about the situation. I quietly crept up to the door and looked through the peephole. I nearly felt my heart stop when I saw there were 3 guys outside the door. The guy in front I couldn't really see as he was bent down, and apparently, I assumed, trying to pick the lock. The other 2 guys, however, were wearing black and wearing hockey masks. It took me a moment to gather my sensibilities about me. I assumed that since I never made my presence known, that they must have assumed no one was home and were trying to break in. However, I didn't think making my presence known would have done myself any good. But I also didn't know how long it would take the guy to get in the door. I did the only thing I could think of. My parents, who I mentioned were overprotective, had a security system in the house. I went and quickly pushed the panic button. The alarm went off, and it was a loud alarm. I couldn't hear over the alarm if the guy was still trying to pick the lock or not, but I figured because the noise of the alarm was drowning everything else out, I could run over and bolt the door too. I had been hesitant to do that at first because they would have heard it. I looked out the peephole, and the 3 guys had scattered. The alarm did its job. The thing that gets me about this situation is that I was being so cautious about everything. I never answered the door, and never made my presence known, even before I knew 3 guys were trying to break into my house. This was a little unusual for me, but there was just something about the incident that made me not want to answer the door either time, and I am very glad I didn't. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you'd like to read print versions of these stories, please check them out on the Killer Orange Cat subreddit, at the link in the description. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please let me know by hitting the like button. Subscribe and hit the bell notification if you haven't before, so you'll be updated when each new video comes out. Leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address provided in the description. My main requirement is the story must be original, and not have been read on any other YouTube channel. And please, whatever you do, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.